takže... Is that all right for you? Looks like it's your...
Perfect.
Yeah.
And David, do you have a pointy stick? Oh, perfect.
Also, if you want, there's a ladder in the back.
Lower risk there.
Yeah.
But if you need it, it's just right there, bring it in, and this should be fine.
I can go.
Yeah, you just point the right direction.
Oh, okay.
You can come to the... You can leave this here and you can just wait.
To je pro tebe.
Opravdu? Jiří, ale víš, že je to u tebe pozornost?
Ano, je.
Překvapení?
Dalo by se to tak říct.
Jiří, víš, že jsem dojel?
Ano, vím.
Mohu?
Musíš.
Já jsem tak napjatý.
Ano, si.
Tak to jsi nemusel.
Taková malá pozornost.
Dobrý večer, vážené dámy a vážení pánové. Vítám vás na dalším ze dnů Měsíc autorského čtení. Dnes přivítáme fantastickou skotskou autorku Lindu Cracknell, která píše prózu, která píše povídky, romány a také literaturu faktu, kreativní literaturu faktu a rádiové hry. Řada jejich povídek získala ocenění Macallan, což je takové skotské ocenění, a byla nominována na řadu dalších ocenění. Její první román Call of the Undertow vyšel v roce 2013. V letošním roce vyšla kniha, ze které bude dnes číst, a je to kniha Doubling Back, 10 Paths Trodden in Memory. A je to kniha, ve které spojuje výklad toho, jak funguje paměť a příběhy nějakých vycházek. Takže to je literatura faktu, ale kreativní. Její povídky vyšly například ve sbírce The Searching Glance a v řadě různých dalších antologií. Píše také pro BBC Radio vlastní hry i adaptace světových děl anebo právě literatury faktu. Z jejich her můžeme zmínit například hru The Three Knots nebo hru The Lamp. A to je asi všechno, co potřebujete zatím vidět a poprosím vás o uvítání Lindy Cracknell.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you very much for coming. First of all, I would like to, I'm going to read two pieces tonight, and I'd like to orientate you in Scotland with a map.
Dnes vám přečtu 2 ukázky z mého díla a nejdřív bych vás ráda provedla mapou Skotska.
So, this is your geography lesson.
Hodina zeměpisu.
This is where I live.
Tady bydlím já.
And I know that everybody's very interested in Loch Ness after the program, so I can't quite point all the way at it, but it's that long blue line.
A jelikož vím, že všichni mají veliký zájem o Loch Ness, o jezero Loch Ness, tak je to ta modrá dlouhá čára, na kterou jsem právě ukázala.
So it's the very long blue bit there. The two pieces I'm going to read are set. The second one that I'll read is a short story, and it's set in a place called Wick, which is in the far northeast.
Že druhá ukázka, kterou budu číst, je z povídky, a která se odehrává ve městě Wick, která je na dalekém severovýchodě.
I was told I needed a ladder. I think it's true.
Řekli mi, že potřebuju žebřík a měli pravdu. A jenom pro informaci, ten žebřík opravdu je za tím plátnem.
The first piece I'll read is set on the island of Skye, which is here.
A první ukázka, kterou přečtu, je situována na ostrově Isle of Skye, který je tam.
It's one of the largest of the islands.
Je to jeden z největších ostrovů.
I'm just going to show you a few photographs of each place now. So, next slide.
Vám ukážu pár fotografií jednotlivých míst.
This is the second piece that I'm reading, and the next one.
Tohle je z druhé povídky, kterou budu číst.
The wild coast of Caithness.
To je divoké pobřeží.
The next. Big skies. The next.
Velké mraky.
An old harbour.
Starý přístav.
The next. Archaeology.
Archeologie.
The next. A pool called the Trinky, which is made by the sea.
Nádrž, které se říká Trinky a kterou vytvořilo moře.
And the next. This is the first piece I'm going to read, and we're looking here from the mainland to the Isle of Skye, and this short stretch of sea here, there used to be drovers of cattle who would bring the cattle to market over maybe 200 miles. They had to swim them across this stretch of water here.
A tato fotografie se týká první povídky a tam je to pohled z pevniny na Isle of Skye a na ostrov Skye a zajímavostí je, že přes tuto úžinu hnali honáci dobytek na trh a museli ten dobytek hnát přes tu vodu, aby přeplaval.
And the next, an old church on the way, which I'll mention in the text. And the next.
Starý kostel po cestě, který zmíním v textu.
And some famous mountains called the Coolin Mountains.
Slavné hory, kterým se říká Coolin Mountains.
And that's the end of the slideshow.
A to je konec prezentace.
So I'm going to read, first of all, from a piece in my latest book, which is called Doubling Back 10 Paths Trodden in Memory.
Nejprve vám přečtu ukázku z mojí nejnovější knihy, která se jmenuje Doubling Back 10 Paths Trodden in the Memory.
And it's part a travel book, part a memoir. The particular walk that I'm going to read from was a walk from where I live to the Isle of Skye, following the drovers, the cattle drovers.
A tato kniha je kombinací cestopisu a zápisků a memoáru. A v této kapitole popisuji cestu z místa, kde jsem se narodila, na ostrov Isle of Skye, a kde následují cestu těch honáků dobytka.
And this was a walk which took 15 days, and I'm going to read from the 13th day.
A tato cesta trvala 15 dní.
There are two words which I mention a few times, which are very Scottish words, which you may not be familiar with. One is when I say Ben something, Ben is the name of a mountain. And the other one is the word sheeling, which I know there'll be a Czech word for it, which is the place higher on the hill where the cattle were taken in the summer for the better grazing.
V tomto úryvku budu často opakovat dvě skotská slova, která jsou velmi specifická pro skotské nářečí. A jedním z těchto slov je slovo ben, jak jistě možná někteří víte. Ben je slovo, které pochází z Gaelic a znamená to hora. A potom slovo sheeling, což je v překladu pastvina, vyvýšené místo nahoře, kde honáci hnali ten dobytek.
After crossing to the Isle of Skye on the 13th day of my walk, I found myself tightrope walking on the cusp of the autumn equinox. I sheltered from the rising force 8 in a Broadford B&B and prepared for the way ahead. Foremost amongst my guides were the drovers, intelligent, hardy businessmen who fashioned the route with understanding of human and animal movement, weather, watercourses, and sources of hospitality. They found firm ground and food for the cattle. Their confidence in the best ways through the land later led to stones paved over their line, and later still, in some places such as here, tarmac. Strathsurdle cradles the Broadford River, and there the lumpen mass of Ben Nacalich watched me as I walked the windswept valley towards the red van. The hill altered little in shape as I passed south, eroded and rounded out of red granite, unlike the gabbro corrugated black coolin that I was heading for later that day. It framed itself within the doorway of Kilcroist, the ivy-tangled roofless church that sits on an ancient mound. The Cailleach, the old woman or hag goddess, played a central role in a story I'd written 3 years earlier. Loosely set on one of my local hills, Schiehallion, she was losing her power as Beltane marked the arrival of spring. She was a goddess of winter with knuckly cold fingers and a blue face, spreading ice, shattering rocks, and clutching at human hearts. In my version, she was attended by creaking herons. The honk of geese heralding her arrival at Samain and departure at Beltane would be more traditional. In my story, and I suppose in my mind, she was to be feared, a mere hoarse whisper away from death. The Cailleach had been showing herself to me over the summer, cropping up in place names and folkloric stories, her face outlined on the southern headland of the entrance to Loch Broom, and in the names of mountains such as this in Strathsurdle. Not much beyond the churchyard, near where the road turns west and northwest towards Torrin, I left my rucksack and followed the markers uphill from a red van I'd been told to look out for. On the hill, or high pastures, deep underneath the summer sheeling dwellings of a more recent people, a system of caves has concealed ritual mysteries of female fertility. Poised between limestone and granite, where water dives and vanishes into the earth, archaeologists are discovering in layers of ash the story of a fire kept burning for 800 years. Where daylight hits the womb-shaped cave floor, objects associated with the Celtic goddess Bridget had been buried. In this underworld, buried treasure tells of transitions. At the cave entrance, the interface of light and dark, there are quernstones that made flour from grain, iron smelting equipment that changed rock to metal. Bones glimmer, highlighting the point between life and death. Around 80 AD, the site was ritually filled in, and the cave entrance topped with the skeleton of a young woman, the remains of a 5-month-old fetus, and a 2-week-old child. The scent of discovery was palpable. A woman told me she'd come all the way from South Africa to volunteer for 6 weeks on the dig. There were a few of us visiting the site, hanging on the words of the archaeologists. We stood out of the wind in a wooden hut asking questions. Could it be? What if? We added our speculations to theirs and then grew quiet. We were balancing at a season of equal dark and light, in a place where the world above meets the world below, and teetering on a geological boundary. Outside the shed, a white stone stood on the grass. Perhaps 2.5 feet high, it had a wide base and a narrowing, upright body, shaped into curves and edges like a seated figure. Moulded by water and then buried below, it seemed to have as much in common with a sculpture by Henry Moore or Barbara Hepworth as with Bronze Age remains. The stone left me with questions, but it also led me back to another place to which Sue and Ian had taken me on one of the first days of the walk. We'd climbed into Glen Caillich, above the northwest finger of Loch Lyon. It was a small deviation from the route that would later take me through Glenmerran and on to Rannoch Moor. Near the burn, amongst green pastures, we found the small house, Tai Nambodach. Perhaps 2 feet high, including its turf roof, it has stone walls and a paved floor. Because we were there during the 6 months of light, the stones of the front wall had been lifted clear to open the house, and 7 odd stone figures stood in 2 lines in front of it. Licked into curious shapes by burn water, the figures appeared to represent a family. The woman dominates the group. She has a wide, squarish base narrowing into a thin neck and a spherical head of pink stone. The rest of her brood are smaller and less solid, except for one wide, squat one, and are also fashioned by the differential wear of water to give their upper edges rims or lines. They have the dignity of figures on Easter Island. With low cloud obscuring the high ridge, the sides of the Caillich Valley met perfectly at the roof of the little house. In a windswept but fertile green place, the house is said by some to be a shieling shrine. The first thing that would be done as the party arrived each summer to graze the cattle, make cheese, tell stories, was to open up the house and bring out the figures. But even now, the ritual opening and closing of the house is continued at the 2 ends of the year. We pondered what force it was that would bring a modern-day gilly up on his quad bike to officiate, and what it meant that something which spoke of fertility was positioned by the burn and glen named for an old woman. Is it that the 3 phases of womanhood, girlhood, fertility, and age, are gathered in one place? The image of the bold stone woman had stayed with me. She'd given me my send-off as I crossed my first real threshold into the unsettled West out of my home territory when Ian and Sue turned for home. Now, here at High Pastures, where orange tape marked the edge of the excavation and enthusiasts scrabbled at discovery with earth-grained hands, she seemed to show herself again, just as I neared the end of my 2-week-long journey. Before I left, I asked the archaeologist for his name. Martin Wildgoose, he said. Of course, I thought, hearing an echo of the skein cries of migration that I'd heard creaking above me over the last days, marking the change in the year. I cast a wry nod at Ben na Caillich. The hag goddess was prowling nearby, waiting to be heralded in again by her geese. I walked back down the grassy slope towards my rucksack, the road, the way ahead. A small figure in a red cagoule moved very slowly ahead of me. It took the road in the same direction, the hood up, arms splaying a bit awkwardly at its sides. It seemed to list like an overloaded boat lashed at by the wind. I caught up quickly, and when the figure turned at my greeting, I saw it was the elderly woman who had been in the hut when I arrived at the dig, asking a great many questions. I went on, eager to make some headway on the 10 miles of road I had to march before the up and over on the track to Camasunary. I was also eager to get to the cafe. I wondered how far the old lady was going. The village of Torrin hugs a low slope on the eastern side of Loch Slappin. I descended through it, enjoying its bright green meadows and effervescent sprays of orange Montbretia startling against the white cottages. On the other side of the loch, the fierce fortress of Blaven thrust up its craggy skyline, black and Gothic. I sat out several heavy showers in the Blue Shed Cafe, drank coffee, had soup and toasties. I wrote in my journal, looked out as sheets of rain obscured and then shimmered on Blaven's gully-scarred rocks. In the middle of the day, a warm fug of travellers' conviviality steamed the windows of the cafe. Each new arrival had to be helped with the damp-stuck door. After about 45 minutes, the woman in the red cagoule arrived, and we were soon sharing a table, she encouraging me to eat some cake. She wore a blue jumper which matched her eyes, and she never stopped smiling. There was a sense of great intelligence about her, at the same time as a vagueness, an otherworldliness. We talked about what we were both doing, her adventures that week on local buses around youth hostels on the island. She told me how, by living in a retirement apartment in Edinburgh, she'd lost the stars in the night sky to a halo of orange security lighting. But in certain places, at night on Arthur's Seat, she could still find true dark, even in the city. She told me of her former love of walking, and we spoke of unconventional lifestyles. She seemed to understand with almost no explanation what I was doing and why. During our conversation, it was as if a tide that had gone out came splashing and tumbling back onto the shore. My journey had been in question the night before, my way lost. I'd felt wounded and weak. When she stood up to catch her bus back to Uig, she paused and made sure I was listening. I have arthritis now. It stopped me, but please, keep doing it, she said. Keep walking, for just as long as you can. And I promised her that I would. I was rummaging in my rucksack outside the cafe when I heard the blue Highland bus growling up the hill behind me. I turned around. There was only one passenger on it, seated near the front. At the same moment, each of us threw an arm high in the air in an affectionate salute. I followed the bus with my eyes until it was out of sight. Perhaps I'd seen the woman I hoped to be in my 70s, and she'd seen someone she used to be. As she headed northeast past Kilcroist and up the valley to Broadford, I knew that a tall, broad hill would watch the bus pass at its feet along the single-track road. I began to understand that in her simplest form, the Cailleach represents a different stage of life. I thought of this woman as my Cailleach, and I no longer felt afraid. Thank you for listening so intently. The second piece is fiction. The title is The Horizon Pool. And as I said, this one is set in the far northeast of Scotland in Wick. You have to imagine that I'm a 17-year-old boy.
Další ukázka je próza, která se jmenuje Pool in the Horizon, neboli nádrž nebo bazén, vidíte v překladu za obzor. A musíte si představit, že jako vypraveč jsem 17letá dívka, 17letý chlapec, pardon. A celý příběh se odehrává v tom místě zvaném Wick, které jsem vám ukazovala na té mapě, na dalekém severu.
The horizon pool. Car Kenny, Mum says, from the open door. I turn my back on the town and its famous chanting gulls and church bells. I turn my back on the sun, too, falling down over west somewhere, and walk towards a horizon and a high tide. I pass the public baths, but I keep away from swimming there now. The clue's in the name. The splash and screaming tricks its way through brick and even through the torrent in my head. They said swimming could be part of my cure. So I started going out of town instead, to have my warm blood sucked out by the North Sea, to swim alone in the Trinky pool, to be swallowed whole. It takes about 20 minutes to walk out along the edges of the empty harbours. I've grown up here, but never noticed before all the space that must have once had something in it. Old quarries that someone's trimmed with picnic tables, and a trail of words carved into stone. I leave the last house behind, past the anchor and the plough rusting on the headland, and turn the corner, following the road along the low cliff. Headlands stretch into the surf ahead, one after the other, fading 100 miles south towards Inverness. College there was in my sights before, clubs and crush and laughter. And now to my left's a long line that steadies my eyes. I think of the pool as a wee whitewashed trinket out on the shore, a shimmering rectangle amongst rocks, weed, grey skies. When it comes into view this time, a shock stops my feet. An oyster catcher is patrolling its walls, strutting black and white like a Spanish waiter. That's okay, but there's a head breaking the surface, another swimmer, and then, geez, it's gone. I wait and watch the still sheet. Not even a ripple. I must have imagined it. My head's dotted with the waterfall that rushes through it night and day, that's all. I walk on. Mum says now it's 3 months I should think about getting back in touch with things. At least go and see your pals at the end of year dance. But why would they want to see me? I don't ask her that. With this going on in my head, I say instead, I wouldn't hear the music, let alone the chat. I thought the rushing came from something in the house at first, the fridge or planes constantly going overhead. But it comes with me when I go out, and no one else can hear it. It cushions me from music, TV, Mum and Grandad talking. In bed, I hold my breath and dive under the duvet. That's when it's loudest. That's all there is with me in the dark. Mum says it was probably the head injury caused it, or maybe, she said once, all that loud music, you know, that you lads listened to. I remember, probably not long ago, not long before, when Dodge was round once and we were leaving the house together. Look at you two strapping loons now, she was laughing. And bairns, just a while ago, always tangled together in a turry-murray you were. Couldn't tell one from the other, excepting your blonde head, nodding first up at me, and then at him, and your dark one. Grandad says she complains how I'm so quiet. She hardly knows me now, but I could say the same of her. She's quit the shouting, unless it's just that I don't hear it. She's researched my condition, says it's unusual in young people. Stress, she says. Stress, I say. I'm not doing exams like the rest. Well, she says, all gentle. For a start, bereavement's stressful. She waits a moment. And maybe... She doesn't finish, but I think she's wanting to say something about guilt or sadness. But what use are they? Feelings that can't even stir the kelp. They cried me the barnacle at school. I know some of them said we kept so tight because his old man gave him things like the folding scooter we both flew down Harbour Terrace on, and then the computer games, and most recently, the escort. But I stuck to him even once the white baseball cap got wedged on and he started getting into trouble. Grandad told me Mum wouldn't look at the wreck. People said it was a mystery how anyone got out alive. I know the other lads are cruising the town now when I see Mum look up from what she's doing and her shoulders shiver. It's like she thought all their exhausts would have been shocked into silence. Arms of rock here catch between them a wee stretch of water and a glossy slip slop of seaweed. But the Trinky holds more because back in Grandad's young days they made a proper pool of it with a concrete floor built up to level with the rock and 2 walls, one long, one short, to hold in the sea at high tide. They closed out the currents and swell, all the dangers and doubts. He talks about it as if it was all glamour and sunshine back then, with hundreds going to swim. He says not all houses in the town had running water, which might be why the Trinky was so popular. Stink or swim, they said. It still tickles him, wobbling all his chins. I walk down the wee set of steps from the cliff onto the slab that tips towards the pool. The swell puffs up the surf, then smashes it down onto rocks right next to the Trinky's calm. I sometimes stand and stare at the short wall that divides the still pool from the jabble, the same water acting so differently on either side. The rock's smooth underfoot at first, and then gnarly where old white paint still clings between knots and knobbles of stone. I plouter in, my feet sluicing into ice, till I'm gripped waist deep, gasping, flinching from the last committing plunge. A quick breath, then I'm under. Christ! I'm under the pale green wash of the surface, knees coming up to my chest, and arms wrapping around them, scalped by cold. The salt bounce tries to float me up, but I anchor both hands to a bearded rock, sit myself cross-legged on the bottom. Until now, when I've done this, a lung-bursting moment has come, rocketed me back into air and life. Maybe I come here to persuade myself that's what I choose. The memories sometimes get shaken up then. Usually it's being in the escort with Dodge, our world enclosed by tinted glass and metal. We throbbed music from an open window as we cruised through the town, turned it up if we passed a girl, especially if it was Amanda Gilbertson. Aye, I remember now, that was her name. Though I don't suppose either of us ever spoke to her. The big bore exhaust, spotlights, alloy wheels. He could only afford the plastic ones right enough. But we didn't worry about that with the pedal to the metal on the Thurso Road, mouthing the words, dancing into the dark. It's hard enough to stand out from the crowd in a town that's dressed by Tesco's. When I went back to where it happened, the plastic covering all the bouquets had gone brittle, and I could see and hear just how it rattled in the wind. And there were still wee cubes of glass glinting on the road. I picked up a metallic blue fragment. There was white fiberglass showing inside. I reckon it was part of the spoiler he was so proud of. Sometimes memories of that night drift back. The bang, a weightless flight, the dire silence and dark on the other side of that roadside wall. I tighten my eyes against the salt sting and wait, wrapped by gloom and rush and pulse, no past, no future. I won't go back. I'll stay down here forever. But a sense of shadowing overhead opens my eyes. Against the light above me, a huge swimmer is silhouetted, dense and dark and very close, flying across the surface. I shoot up in its wake, snuttering water, spluttering for breath. My feet stride for the shore, numbed to rock, clumsy with depth. Then a glance back shows me the surface is still and unbroken. The head that finally surfaces at the far end of the pool is dark. The swimmer was under for so long it seems like hibernation or a coma. It points its nose towards the sky, sinking down so that only the nostrils and whiskers twitch on the surface. I laugh right loud, out loud, a great guttering and gurgling. And then I imitate the seal, letting my body sink, tipping back my head until my nose and mouth just kiss the surface. When I stand up again, it's gone, damn it. But then I sense a gaze, find it surfaced a wee bit behind me, head lifted high out of the water on a long neck, watching me with cartoon curiosity. Its face matches the rocks around the pool, soft grey, motley with lichens. Flesh hangs in coils under its chin. Perhaps it got washed in with the high tide, breaking the pool's long wall. Then it ducks, and its long back oils above the surface, coiling downwards to leave a mirror. I hurtle after it, eyes wide open now, into the green. The dim dusk light makes an ocean of the pool, but I finally see the creature curling its silver body ahead. It darts, swift and whiskery, jinking and somersaulting when it scents the edges. The seal comes up where I least expect it, slicing open the surface with silent skin. It stops to watch me again with large black eyes, nostrils flaring. I see a bead of water roll down its neck onto the taut surface, but I don't just see it. I distinctly hear it chime, a pure, clear, close note. And as my playmate's head sinks from me again and I plunge after it, I wonder. When it finds the wall that breaks the water in two, when it slips back over the concrete boundary, will I allow the swell to lift me too and follow the seal out into all the raw and froth and deep green of the wild sea? Thank you very much.
Děkujeme. Teď se pozvolna přesuneme k diskuzi, takže bych poprosil, kdo máte dotazy, můžete se přihlásit o slovo.
Good evening. Ta vaše proza je založená hodně na popisech, a to popisech skotské krajiny. Tak bych se chtěl zeptat, jestli máte nějakou prozu, která se odehrává, dejme tomu v zahraničí nebo někde, kde je to pro vás neznámé, a jestli to taky vlastně funguje pro vás.
Good evening. I've noticed that what you read, your prose, your fiction is based on the descriptions a lot of the Scottish landscape, of the Scottish countryside. So, have you ever written anything about other countries, about other landscapes?
Yes, I have. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I've written. I spent some time living in East Africa, in Zanzibar, and I've written some stories which are set there. And I'm trying to think where else. Spain? I think I've set some stories in Spain.
And is it different, or the way you say how you think about it?
Did you want to translate?
Yes, I will.
Yeah.
Autorka chvíli žila ve východní Africe, konkrétně v Zanzibaru, a o této krajině napsala do této krajiny umístila i některé své příběhy. A dále žila i ve Španělsku, o kterém také psala. A dotaz spočívá v tom, jestli to bylo velice rozdílné od toho, co píše běžně o Skotsku.
I think the process is very much the same, and for me the stories often come from the place. You know, they seem to come with the process of walking and becoming familiar with the place. The difference may be that because I live in Scotland, I know the Scottish landscape quite intimately.
Ten proces psaní je stejný, ale to psaní se samozřejmě odvíjí z velké části od toho místa a od toho duchu toho místa. A vychází také z těch procházek, kdy ty místa se stanou pro mě známější. ale co se týče té skotské krajiny, tak k té mám takový velice osobní vztah a je to takový intimní vztah, takže tam ty popisy jsou o to bližší.
Další otázka?
Dobrý večer. Mně to vaše čtení připadá takové lyrické, až trochu melancholické. A tady se o vás píše, že učíte tvůrčí psaní. Jakým způsobem? Jaké děláte semináře nebo děláte nějaké workshopy? Jak to u vás probíhá?
So, good evening. I'd say I had a feeling that your writing is lyric or melancholic a little, and I've read about you that you teach creative writing, and I'd like to know if you teach it through workshops or seminars, or how do you do it?
Thank you for your question. It's teaching creative writing is controversial in Britain. I don't know if it is here. Some people say you cannot teach creative writing. I think you can, because you can encourage particular practice and discipline. And my method, I suppose, is to run workshops in which I try to suggest a way of my own creative process, which may not be someone else's, putting that into workshop activities. So, shall I let you translate that?
No, go on.
For example, I know that I have to write the first draft. It's very messy. So I give permission for people to write quite bad first drafts. And then the work and the making of it into a good piece of writing is in the rewriting. So this is something that I would try and encourage in any workshop.
A co se týče výuky kreativního psaní nebo tvůrčího psaní, nevím, jak je to tady, ale ve Velké Británii je to poněkud kontroverzní záležitost, protože spousta lidí si myslí, že něco takového se nedá vyučovat. Já jsem přesvědčená, že to je možné, že můžete ty lidi naučit aspoň určité praktické věci, určité postupy a disciplínu, se kterou by mohli postupovat. Moje metoda spočívá ve výuce pomocí workshopů, pomocí dílen, jestli tomu tak chcete říct třeba. Já těm lidem navrhuji, jim představuji způsob, kterým já píšu, což nemusí být samozřejmě něco, s čím se stotožní každý. V těchto workshopech potom nacvičujeme podle těch mých zaběhaných postupů a kdybych to měla přiblížit, tak to spočívá v tom, že první verzi, kterou napíšu, je taková velice hrubá a není úplně hotová, a proto já těm studentům dávám povolení, aby v podstatě psali celkem nahrubo a tak jakože špatně ten první a potom to právě umění jako kdyby spočívá v tom přepisování, v té druhé verzi.
Does this answer your question?
Odpověděla vám tím na otázku?
Samozřejmě, že mě zajímají, odpověděla, ale samozřejmě, že mě zajímají detaily, jak se to vaří, že? Ale tohle bylo hezké, děkuji.
Yes, of course, you answered the question. We're interested in the details, in the very details of how you have prepared the recipe for such thing.
The other thing I could say is that I make people walk, because I think walking is very good for writing.
A další věc, kterou můžu prozradit, je, že lidi nutím chodit, protože si myslím, že chození je pro kreativní činnost velice důležité. Yeah. So the first sentence I wanted to say, and I forgot, was that I wanted to mention you're a writer on the road.
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question. I really enjoyed both stories. The fun thing was that one was fiction and the other non, basically. So my question here is this. As a writer, okay, as a photographer, if I want to take a picture of a landscape, I have to go out and, take the picture. If I were a painter back in the olden days, I used to go out, sit on a chair with, one of those easels, I don't know whether they still do that, and paint the picture, right? if you're a writer writing about a landscape, you don't actually have to be there to write about it. So my question is, do you? You know, I'll just say that in Czech. Já jsem se chtěl zeptat vlastně v rámci toho psaní o nějaké té přírodě, o tom prostředí. Když člověk fotí, tak jde, vyfotí si to krajinu, namalovat krajinu se dá jaksi i na místě, i jinde. A ta otázka je, jestli, když člověk o krajině píše, tak jestli v ní je v ten moment.
My answer for me is that I do have to go to the place. I don't think I've ever successfully written about a place that I haven't been to.
You actually write when you're there?
Notes. I write notes, and then they become fuller pieces. I take sound recordings, sometimes photographs, and little notes. Yeah.
Co se týče psaní o určitých krajinách, tak vždycky tam musím být a musím to místo navštívit, abych o něm mohla psát. Myslím, že jsem nikdy nepsala o místě, které bych sama osobně nenavštívila. A co se týče upřesnění této otázky, jestli píšu přímo na tom místě, tak si tam dělám poznámky, fotím si to místo a občas si i nahrávám nějaké zvukové záznamy. Viktore?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Some writers mean that to be a good writer is to use some words which were in 19th century prohibited, and that they need to be very quickly also. You
Need
are
to be very
quickly.
Okay.
I think that you need not such words, and you are very slowly in your text, and also when you read it. But I think my option is to read such books as you write. And to my question, my questions will be as yesterday. So he was born in Netherlands, but again, excuse me, I don't know where concretely.
Mm-hmm.
Then how you will vote?
Mm-hmm.
Takže jo, a jsem se zeptal, jak bude volit, kde teda se narodila v Holandsku. And third, one half of this month full of people from Scotland is now behind us. And I am a little surprised that I think a little, maybe because we have so few time, an interest for such things which we have here in Moldavia, same or similar as you have in Scotland, was not so strong, so large, so deep as I supposed. So it can be a third question about this. Thanks.
Že třetí otázka ohledně
že mě překvapilo, že jsem si myslel, že Skotsko má s Borovou tolik společného, že jsem čekal, že tady bude trošku ohnivější, hlubší diskuze a ono to tolik nejiskří. Nevím proč.
Yes, so there were 3 questions and we'll go, one after each other. Yes?
I'm not sure if I got the first one about the quickly slowly.
The first one, so there was just an introduction, and then the first question, the real question, actual
It's
question
identity.
is you were born specifically in Netherlands, in the Netherlands.
Yeah, I'm not Scottish. Shock, horror. I'm English, and I've lived in Scotland since 1990. And I was born in the Netherlands by accident because my father was working in the Netherlands at that time. So my adopted, where in Rijswijk? Do you know Rijswijk? No. The Hague. It's near The Hague. Yeah. Den Haag.
Yeah.
Yeah. My adopted home is Scotland since 1990. And actually, I started writing in 1995 in a very amateur way. So all my experience as a writer has been in Scotland. So I have quite a confused identity because I'm definitely English, but I'm often called a Scottish writer because I'm quite closely associated with Scottish writing networks, the Scottish landscape, etc. I can't tell you how I'm going to vote because I don't know yet. It's a very complex decision, especially if you have a confusion over your own identity. And I have a concern about the rest of the UK if Scotland is independent, because historically Scotland has been more left-wing than the rest of the UK. So if you remove Scotland's vote from Westminster, it could, a lot of the, there's current dissatisfaction with the government at Westminster. This could become harder to shift for the rest of the UK if Scotland leaves. So I have mixed I feel full of optimism for Scotland, but I have concerns for the rest of the other countries of the UK.
Okay, so I'll go on that. Já bych ráda na začátek řekla, že nejsem Skotka, ale Angličanka. Jaký šok to je. Ve Skotsku žiju od roku 1990 a v Nizozemí jsem se narodila náhodou, protože tam zrovna pracoval můj otec. Na otázku, kde přesně, tak to bylo ve městě Roswijk, poblíž Hágu. Mým přijatým domovem je Skotsko, kde jsem bydlela, jak jsem již říkala, od roku 1990. Psát jsem začala v roce 1995 a mohu říct, že to psaní bylo takové amatérské. Co se týče mé identity, tak je tím pádem taková zmatená a nejasná. Cítím se jako Angličanka, nebo jsem Angličanka, ale psaním mě spíš řadí jako ke skotským autorům, protože se patřím k té skotské síti autorů a píši o skotské krajině. A co se týče referenda a mého názoru v referendu, nemohu vám zatím říct, protože ještě nevím. Jak byste asi čekali od člověka, který je zmatený z vlastní identity. Jediná věc, která mě docela trápí, je ta, že když se Skotsko osamostatní, co se vlastně stane se zbytkem Anglie, protože Skotsko, jak jste již slyšeli, nebo jak možná víte, je dost levicové a tím pádem by to mohlo docela silně změnit a posunout to spektrum v celé Anglii. Takže cítím hodně optimismu, co se týče Skotska a jeho nezávislosti, ale mám jisté pochyby ohledně celé Velké Británie.
I think I haven't answered one of the questions.
Oh yeah, we'll get back to it.
Okay.
Good evening. I would like to thank you very much for a wonderful reading, Linda. And I would like to ask you two questions. One, I have walked with you in Africa, in Kenya. I have walked with you in Scotland only last week. And I'm happy that Helmut drove over and we are able to walk with you a little bit here in the Czech Republic. I just wanted to ask you, because I observed your life last week, I stayed with you, it's hectic. You have lots of things to do, both domestic and outside in Edinburgh, and you live with big distances. At the same time, in your home village in Aberfeldy, you have lots of fans. They love you, they follow you, you made many people walk along with us to Inner Perthshire, something which I'll never forget. Where do you find the loneliness of a writer, and how do you manage to go deep into things that you just see along the way and bring them out so succinctly and excellently? And that's one question.
Okay, but I'm sorry to say that, but this question was kind of complicated very much, and it wasn't very narrow. But I'll try to it was sort of 3 questions in one. Okay, but I'll write down the second question, please. Yeah.
If I know that you also write drama, and I've listened to your plays on BBC. So I wanted to ask you very clearly this time, not to illustrate too much for the interpreter, how do you leave one genre to the other? One is very calm, and as somebody said before, the one sitting in front, very slow and lyrical, and drama is very immediate and to the point. If you could just speak a little bit about that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. To krátce shrnu. Děkuji za úžasné čtení. Byli jsme spolu, chodili jsme spolu po Kenii, chodili jsme spolu ve Skotsku, po Skotsku nedávno, minulý týden. Já jsem si to velice užila a ještě jsme tady kousek se prošli i v Brně. Vím, že váš život je hektický a máte hodně věcí na práci i ve svém domově, i na dalších místech, které jsou poměrně daleko od místa, kde se nacházíte nejčastěji, že máte fanoušky ve své rodné vesnici, jestli vás následují na vaše koncerty a kde nakonec tady v tom zmatku nacházíte to osamocení toho spisovatele. Druhá otázka se týkala dramatu a jak přecházíte z tohoto žánru té prózy, která je, jak již bylo zmíněno, klidná, pomalá a lyrická, do žánru dramatu, který je takový je bližší a je okamžitější v tom smyslu té interakce s divákem. Okay, so
Okay.
you can start anywhere you want.
Well, I'll start with the question about how I find the solitude that's necessary for writing. And I think it is true at the moment that my life feels very full of things that are not directly getting words onto a page. And that's partly because I've had 2 books out in the last 9 months, which I wouldn't choose to do that again. It's partly because I do a lot of teaching and other kinds of work with encouraging other people to write in order to make a living, because I don't earn very much from writing. And I'm not sure what the other reason is. But it's true that at the moment there isn't much room for the real business of writing, which means sitting on a chair with something in front of you, usually paper and a pen or a computer. And the way that I wrote this book, which is my novel Call of the Undertow, was by writing for 1 hour a day. And that's how I wrote the first draft. So in 3 months, with not very much time, I had a first draft of a novel.
Okay. Začnu tou otázkou té osamělosti nebo toho klidu na psaní. Momentálně mám na starosti spoustu věcí, které přímo nepřispívají k tomu mému psaní a které nevytváří slova na papíře. V posledních 9 měsících se mi podařilo vydat 2 knihy a jak jsem již říkala, tak se zabývám spoustou jiné práce, kterou potřebuji k tomu, abych se uživila. Takže například vyučuji a poskytuji ostatním lidem rady, jak mají sami psát. Takže co se týče toho psaní jako full-time autor, že bych seděla na židli a měla před sebou papír a tužku nebo počítač a hledala nějaké osamění, to se mě netýká. Co se týče mého románu Call of the Undertow, ten jsem napsala tak, že jsem si řekla a dodržela jsem to, že budu psát 1 hodinu každý den a povedlo se mi první verzi dokončit během 3 měsíců. Okay.
But it doesn't exactly answer the question about solitude, because you need a lot of time to reflect, and that is quite a difficult thing, especially when you have books being published. And I think to some extent you just have to say, there's a book out, I have to do lots of public things, and I enjoy it, so I don't complain too much.
To, což bohužel nezodpovídá tu otázku toho osamění autora. Když vydáváte knihy, když je vydáváte, tak musíte strávit spoustu času také přemýšlením nad těmito knihami a jejich přepisováním, a takže je to taková složitá věc. A když vydáte knihu, tak se musíte hodně často pohybovat na veřejnosti a tu samotu nemáte, ale mě to nevadí, já si to užívám.
And the other question about the different forms, moving between prose and radio drama, or it could be another form. I'm not very good at doing more than one project at a time. So I'm not a prolific writer. It might seem like that, having 2 books in 9 months, but this one, doubling back, I started in 2007, so it took quite a long time. And radio drama is a very different form, but the way I see it is it's like an iceberg. Well, I don't know if an iceberg is really shaped like that, but the bit above the water here is the dialogue. That's what you get on the page. But underneath that is exactly what you would have in a novel, but it's in my head. So I have to know the characters just as well. I have to understand the backstory of the characters, what's driving them, and the kind of conflicts that that's going to lead to. And then the very last thing that will happen is that I'll write the dialogue.
Takže co se týče těchto forem literárních, které já píšu, o kterým se zabývám, nerada, nebo nikdy to nedělám tak, že bych dělala víc věcí zároveň, že bych dělala víc věcí ve stejnou dobu. Ráda bych řekla, že nejsem extrémně plodná autorka jako někteří jiní autoři. Možná to tak vypadá, když mi vyšly za posledních 9 měsíců 2 knihy, ale tu knihu Doubling Back jsem začala psát už v roce 2007. Co se týče těch her pro rádio, je to rozhodně odlišná forma, kterou já osobně vnímám jako ledovec. Pokud si představíme ledovec jako ve tvaru jistého trouhelníku, tak ta část, která je nad vodou, může být vnímána jako ty dialogy v té hře, dialogy na stránce, zatímco to, co je pod tou vodou, jsou všechny ty informace, které jsou v pozadí, které jsou důležité pro vývoj těch charakterů, informace o těch postavách, které já jako autorka musím nejdřív vymyslet a pochopit a nějakým způsobem stanovit. A potom teprve je na čase napsat tu část, která je nad vodou, když je ten základ hotový. Okay.
Já bych zkusil tematicky navázat na ten předchozí dotaz a zeptal bych se, jaká jsou témata vašich rozhlasových her a co vás vlastně zaujalo na rozhlasové tvorbě. Proč rozhlas?
I'd like to follow up. I'd like to follow the previous question, and I'd like to ask you about your radio plays and what themes, what topics are the ones that you use the most, and what seems the most interesting thing to you about writing radio plays?
Thank you for the question. What I love about radio drama is that the stage is in the listener's imagination, and so you can set your play anywhere. You could be on the moon, you could be somebody I know wrote a play that was about an embryo inside a woman's stomach. You can take your action anywhere, and the listener does the imaginative work exactly the same way as with a piece of fiction in a book. So to me, it's a wonderfully personal and intimate form with the listener and the sound. It does need drama, obviously, and so the things that I found interesting to write about have quite often had a historical underpinning. Even when they're contemporary, there's content from history which is important. And the tricky thing with that is that you have to communicate some information through what the characters say, and that could be very boring if you do it in the wrong way. So usually 3 characters is a good number. I've written with more, but keeping it small keeps the action very tight. Characters who are quite different to each other and have sufficiently different backstories that at some point they're going to conflict with each other. I've written a story that was a play that was set in the 1840s in the west coast of Scotland. And at that time, there was almost a revolution because the ordinary people left the church completely. All of them all walked out. And the reason was because the landowners could make the decisions about the minister and the church, and the congregation thought that wasn't correct, so they left. And it created, it was like a sort of small revolution. There was a lot of passion. It was very evangelical period. So the play that I wrote took the son of the landlord, the landowner, and the son of a farmer, who were very divided by this revolution on different sides, but had been friends since they were young boys, and put them together in quite a difficult situation. And then I added to it a witch who could cast a spell. And then there was a mix which made a story happen.
OK, so co se týče těch rozhlasových her, nejvíc mi na tom líbí, že to jeviště je celé v hlavě posluchače. Takže můžete ten příběh umístit kam chcete. Můžete umístit na Měsíc. Znám i autora, nebo autorku, která popisovala příběh embrya v ženském lůně, takže ho můžete prakticky zanést kamkoliv. Ten proces je stejně u toho přijímače, u toho posluchače je stejný, jako když čte prózu. A mně se na tom líbí, že to je úžasně intimní, úžasně osobní záležitost, úžasný vztah mezi tím posluchačem a tím zvukem, který se mu dostává. Co se týče témat, tak často i dokonce v současných příbězích ze současnosti používám motivy historického pozadí nebo pozadí historických událostí. Na čemž je největší výzvou a nejtěžší na tom je komunikovat tyto věci skrze monology nebo dialogy těch postav. Nejčastěji používám ve svých hrách 3 postavy, to je takový obvyklý počet postav, kdy ta akce, kdy ta dynamika té hry je největší. Tyto postavy většinou mají také různé pozadí, různé poměry a potom mezi nimi dochází k jistému konfliktu. Jedna z her, kterou jsem například napsala, se odehrává ve 40. letech 19. století na západním pobřeží Skotska, kdy došlo k takové menší revoluci, můžeme říct, kdy běžní lidé opustili církev z toho důvodu, že majitelé půd, feudálové, mohli rozhodovat ohledně kněžích a ohledně lidí, kteří zastávali úřad v církvi. Proto ti běžní lidé opustili církev a došlo tak k malé revoluci, která byla ve své podstatě evangelická. A v té hře jsou hlavními postavami syn jednoho feudála a syn farmáře, kteří jsou přátelé už od malička, a takto se ocitnou ve velice složité situaci. A třetí postava, aby to celé nějakým způsobem doplnila, je čarodějka, která má moc seslat nějaké kouzlo.
Hello. So yeah, I would have one question. Before you said that you think of yourself as having Scottish and English identity. So I wanted to ask if this is reflected in your literature. So if this may be one of the things that is driving you to write, and how does it affect the outcome? Thank you.
Did you get it? Yes. Ráda bych se zeptala na to, co už bylo řečeno ohledně vaší národnosti a o tom, jestli jste Skotka, Angličanka, jak se cítíte a jak se to odráží ve vaší tvorbě v tématech, o kterých píšete.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think my writing is very much influenced by my Scottish experience because I think the landscape and its mythology, its history has a very big impact on my writing, which could equally happen in a different place, but there is something very particular about the Scottish landscape, which to me is full of stories and monsters and creatures and interesting things for a writer. But there's also quite a tradition in Scotland of a few things which have really helped me. One is that the short story form is strong in Scotland. I'm not quite sure why that is, but it seems to have been better understood and supported in Scotland than in England, for example. And there's quite a tradition of writing in a kind of Gothic tradition, which sometimes my writing can be a bit Gothic. So I think I've probably gained from that. And the other thing is more practical, which I think I've certainly found that I've been very well supported by institutions and networks within Scotland that serve writers, perhaps partly because it's a small country that you tend to get to know the people that you need to know, and so very quickly you make a network of friends who are supportive to your creative work.
V mé tvorbě jsem výrazně ovlivněna, jak jsem již říkala, tou skotskou zkušeností, tím mým pobytem ve Skotsku, kdy mě ovlivňují zejména ta úžasná krajina a ta mytologie a historie, což by možná fungovalo i kdybych žila na jiném místě. Konkrétně se mi líbí ty skotské příběhy a příšery a různé stvůry a další věci, které mohou být zajímavé pro spisovatele. Další z důvodů, proč se více stotožňuji s tou skotskou tradicí nebo s tím skotským psaním, je také fakt, že povídky z nějakého důvodu jsou ve Skotsku více oblíbené nebo mají větší podporu než v Anglii. To je jedna z věcí. A další věc je třeba také to, že takovéto gotické psaní gotické literatury je ve Skotsku také rozšířenější. A moje psaní je podle mě tak trochu podobné, nebo má ty prvky gotické literatury. Dalším důvodem je také to, že jelikož jsem psala ve Skotsku, tak mě podporují skotské instituce a skotské sítě spisovatelů a tím pádem vytváříte ty vztahy rychleji a rychleji se seznamujete s ostatními.
Poprosil bych poslední krátký dotaz, někoho, kdo se neptal ještě.
Já si odpovíme tu, co jsme přeskočili. Kdybyste se na ně určitě týkat stejně to zeptal. Ona byla dokonce i na Pálavě dneska. Takže, So the question is, where you like walking. So where did you walk here in Brno? And I'd like to add personally, because you walked quite a part of land in the South Moravia. So, and how did you feel about the landscape here?
I've been here for 24 hours, so I haven't walked very far. And actually, I've only walked around this block in Brno so far, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. The architecture is just wonderful. And today we were making a short film with Czech TV, so we went to. Where did I go?
What's the name of the
forgotten
director?
the name of the place where I went.
It was Mikulov. Yeah, do Mikulova.
But the place with the lake that I went.
Nové MLýny.
Okay. So this was where I went. And actually we didn't do very much walking. We went on a boat. But it was very, very interesting for me because on the weekend, as I came away from home, I was on Loch Ness on a boat. And it's very much the same kind of idea that the boat comes in and tourists get on it and they go out to look for the monster and then they come back in again. But it's very beautiful. So it reminded me a lot of being on Loch Ness. And then the film director told me that this area was flooded and it's only about 1 metre or at the most 2 meters deep. Whereas Loch Ness is, I can't remember the exact depth, but it's at least 200 meters deep. And it's thick black water in which monsters live, that they must live there. So it was a wonderful contrast. And the other thing was that there's one tree, I don't know if everybody knows this tree, but there's one tree, it's dead, but that's left standing from the villages that used to be in this place. And the others were all felled by the ice, cutting them. And in this tree today, there were lots of cormorants. I don't know if you know them.
Yeah, that's the same word, yeah.
Oh, is it? Okay. There were lots of cormorants sitting in the tree. And I saw exactly this sight on Monday, just near Loch Ness, of a dead tree with cormorants in it. So there's something magical happening here. And the other thing about that particular landscape, am I going too fast? Is it okay?
Not really, yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, you can say
Okay.
that.
Is that there are 3 hills that you see, one with a castle on the top. And this reminded me of a place in the south of Scotland, which the Romans called Trimontium, 3 hills. They had a fort there. And there's a legend that the hills were built by the devil with his spade. And there are 2 big hills and then a little one. And the little one was just when the devil went with the spade. It was just the last bit of the soil. He flung it over his shoulder. So it reminded me of that. So there were some very nice parallels there, although the landscape looks very different.
Co se týče procházení po Brně, tak jsem viděla jenom tady kousek okolo Husy a po cestě k hotelu, ale rozhodně můžu říct, že to je krásné, že se mi líbí moc ty domy a ta architektura, ale moje větší procházka nebo větší výlet proběhl dnes, když jsme natáčeli krátký film pro Českou televizi. A jedno z těch míst, kam jsme se podívali, byla nádrž Nové Mlýny, kde jsme bohužel nechodili, ale jezdili jsme na loďce. A pro mě to bylo velice zajímavé, protože jsem tam viděla spoustu paralel mezi Jižní Moravou a mezi Skotskem. A zajímavé je taky, že poslední víkend jsem byla na jezeře Loch Ness a také na loďce. Takže ten nápad, ta myšlenka je podobná, kdy ti turisti nasednou na loďku a jdou se podívat na Loch Nessku. A já jsem jela na loďce a dívala jsem se po nádrži Nové Mlýny, tak mi to připomnělo ten výlet ve Skotsku. Režisér mi řekl, že to místo bylo zatopené a u toho zmínil, že hloubka nádrže je pouze 2 metry v nejhlubších místech, což mi přišlo jako úžasný kontrast oproti tomu, co je na jezeře Loch Ness, kde ta hloubka dosahuje až 200 metrů a ta hladina je černá neprostupná tma, ve které žijí ty příšery, musí žít. A další zajímavý úkaz byl mrtvý strom, byl odumřelý strom, který vyrůstá, was the tree in the middle of the lake, který vyrůstá přímo z prostředku toho jezera, který připomíná ty zatopené domy a zatopené místo, které tam bylo předtím. A na tomto uhynulém stromě seděli kormoráni. A mně přišlo fascinující, že úplně stejný pohled se mi naskytl, když jsem byla na lodi na jezeře Loch Ness. Takže bych řekl, že došlo k takovému kouzelnému okamžiku. A další věc, která mi přišla podobná, byla ta s těmi kopci, že na Jižní Moravě, tam na tom místě, kde jsme byli, jsou 3 kopce a na jednom z nich je hrad. A to mi připomnělo místo, které se nachází na jihu Skotska, kterému Římané říkali Trimontium, kde podle legendy tyto kopce vytvořil ďábel a u toho posledního už se mu nechtělo, tak jen tak to odflákl, že hodil trochu hliny za sebe a měl hotovo.
Děkujeme. Byl poslední dotaz.
You were brilliant.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.